Welcome, everyone. My name is Shelley Pryor, and I am the Co-VP of Voter Services for LWV Greenwich. I want to thank my Co-VP Kathy Steele, wave, and our new league president Melissa McClammy, wave, in the back, and my fellow board members, wave, for helping to organize this event. Thank you also to, thank you. Thanks also to Burning Tree and the staff here at Burning Tree. They are consistently extraordinary hosts, and we're really appreciative for the service and professionalism. Thank you to all of you for attending, and sincere thanks to our legislators for agreeing to participate. We're very grateful. LWV Greenwich is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that encourages informed and active participation in government and is dedicated to increasing public understanding of major policy issues. Donations from community members allow us to do our work. For example, your ticket price only covered a fraction of the cost of this event. And as we gear up for voter education work, including our valued voters guides for the upcoming municipal elections, we hope you might consider an extra gift to LWV Greenwich to support this work. The purpose of today's event is to give our state representatives an opportunity to discuss their accomplishments of the past session, as well as issues still on the table in Connecticut. It's a chance for constituents to ask questions. Our goal is for a collegial, respectful conversation in this lovely setting. We've received questions in advance, and we also invite questions, as I mentioned, via the index cards and pass to Kathy. We want to cover as much ground as possible, so we ask our representatives to try to keep their responses as tight as possible. We know that some of the issues are really complex, but we are going to try out tonight some longer responses and then maybe some shorter responses so that we can cover a number of topics. All of you representatives will be given a chance to answer all questions. However, we hope that you will pass if you feel a question has been adequately answered. I will also give a friendly wave if I think it might be great if you should wrap up. And I'll generally try to rotate who answers first, but we are also happy to have some exchanges, and we really just want to keep this friendly and conversational as well. So let's get started, and we'll begin with self-introductions, and if each of you in just 30 seconds would introduce yourselves, your district, and how long you've served. And we could start with Brian.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting us for another very well-attended legislative update, and thank you to all of you for being engaged and attending. The fact that there's 120 people here in the depths of summer is a real testament to our town and our citizenry and how engaged and interested they are in state and local issues where really you as a citizen can make the greatest difference. My name is Ryan Fazio. I've been representing Greenwich, Stamford, and New Canaan in the state Senate for the last 4 years as of this month.
I'm Tina Gorfus. Thank you to the League for having us tonight, and thank you for being here. It's nice to be together with the Greenwich delegation, so it's nice to see you all too. I'm Tina Gorfus. I represent the 149th District in the Connecticut House. I was first elected in November 2024, so this is my first term. My district consists of north of the Post Road, Pembroke, Glenville, Backcountry, North Stamford, and Westover.
Thank you, Tina. First off, I'd like to thank Becca and Morgan, who are out serving us today. Both of them who are in college this year. One's a sophomore, one's a senior. I'm pleased to be your state representative for the 150th district, which means basically, in short word, I'm Mr. Shoreline. I cover the town from the border with Stamford to the border with Portchester, pretty much the Post Road to the water. So that's my district. I have served in the State Assembly for 7 years, which means basically I'm in my 4th term. So the next year will be the completion of a 4-year term. It'll be four terms, or 4 terms of a total of 8 years. And I'm thrilled to be here tonight. And thank you again to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you also to the League of Women Voters for organizing this legislative wrap-up, and to Ryan, Tina, Steve, and myself, to be here. Happy to be with all of you. I represent the 151st District. I am on my second term, and my district goes basically from the Merritt to the railroad tracks, and some places to US 1, and from Lake Avenue to Stamford. And I serve in 3 committees: education, environment, and transportation. I am very proud to represent all of you in Hartford. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Let's start with the good news. Will you each talk about some of your proudest accomplishments of the last term? Hector, why don't you start?
Well,
Like.
I briefly will talk about what we did in the 3 committees that I serve.
Okay.
And as I said, this 2025 was a budget year. So usually those are the long years. And so it was a busy year. And the reason probably that the year was very busy is that we did not have a bipartisan biannual budget by the end of the session. And the budget that we just passed is the single greatest investment in children in our state history. And I'm very proud of that. I serve in education. And in education, among other things, we established a $300 million investable universal preschool trust to provide sustainable funding for new child care programs. We provided historic new funding for special education, improved access to quality health care and community non-profit providers. The single biggest investment in special education, $30 million annually for new special education expansion and development grant to districts, $10 million in competitive grants for more in-district programming, $221 million in annual reimbursement for special education costs, $10 million in financing for capital projects related to special education. Environment. I would like to start saying that we can report wins in environment for the first time in the last 3 years. And they are 2 houses, one house, one bill in the House, 5004, and 2 bills in the Senate. And those bills aiming for the protection of the environment and the development of renewable energy solutions, establishing new targets for the reduction of zero carbon emissions by 2050, plus incentives for solar canopies and heat pumps, also providing tools to towns to address flooding and climate change. These bills provide nature-based solutions and mitigate carbon emissions. We are banning the use of neonics in turf. A step forward, but with too many exceptions. Much more to do moving forward. And the control on the use of rodenticides. It is a reclassification, but also a lot of things to do moving forward. Priorities for next year that didn't pass this year was...
Let's hold priorities for next year.
Very good.
Okay.
We hold them for the next time. And in transportation, an important bill that it was a priority for the industry and the consumer was a bill reforming the motor vehicle towing statutes. We also passed safety bills, like the one implementing the recommendations of the DMW concerning penalties for operating a motor vehicle and vessel under the influence of intoxicating liquor or any other drugs, among other things. And so those are the accomplishments on the 3 communities that I serve. And later on, we will cover other aspects of what our work represents in Hartford. Thank you.
Perfect. Can we go to Tina next?
Sure, thank you. I'd like to focus on 3 things that I was proud of from this first legislative session. The first is the special education bill. I was asked to be the ranking minority member, the ranking Republican on the Select Committee for Special Ed, which was really an honor and not an ordinary assignment for a freshman. And I was very proud of that bill. As people may know, every child in the state of Connecticut, and federally too, every child in the United States is is constitutionally allowed and required. We're required to provide a free and appropriate public education. And so as diagnoses for special education increase for a variety of reasons, the cost of special education is really skyrocketing for towns and for our state. So there are a couple of things to address in this. Number one, how are we funding special ed? And can we make sure that we're fully funding special ed and not leaving towns holding the bag with uncertain budgets year to year? And I really believe that the bill went far in accomplishing that goal by providing more funding and providing more accountability for outsourced providers of special education for who are charging those fees back to the towns, and the fees are rising and rising. That was one really important part of the special ed bill. The other thing I think I really added personally, or our caucus added, was, are we asking the right questions? You know, what are the outcomes to measure whether we're doing a good job for our kids in the state of Connecticut? So the bill really had outcomes measurements and a pathway to really continuing to analyze this so that we made sure we were utilizing best practices. The special ed bill passed both houses unanimously. It was a huge bipartisan effort and was signed into law. Second and third, I would say, were the topics that I really felt I was sent to Hartford to represent us on, and that was local control of housing and fiscal responsibility. On local control, I was a strong advocate on the Housing Committee against the really tsunami of bills that came out against local control this year. And as people know, the big omnibus housing bill was vetoed by the governor. I was an advocate on the floor for that. I wrote him letters. I spoke to him personally 2 times and joined with all of your voices. And ultimately that bill, for the moment, was vetoed. And third, I really feel like being a voice for accountability for fiscal responsibility in our state was an important role too. We broke the fiscal guardrails in this legislative session, unfortunately. I was a strong voice against what I viewed as fiscally irresponsible decisions. And I think for a town like ours and a district like the one I represent, we are footing a lot of the bill, and we are holding the bag for a lot of fiscal, a lot of overspending that's happened in the state. So I believe I've started to establish myself as a voice for balanced, common sense fiscal discipline. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina. We'll go to Steve and then Ryan. Thanks.
So thank you very much. I think the singular most important thing we did in the state this year was in the Commerce Committee. Commerce, where I sit as co-chair of Commerce, we initiated over the last 5 years and finally closed out what is called a Transfer Act. And it's heavy, ponderous legislation, but essentially works to reform the transfer of toxic properties. It establishes how we will sell and redevelop properties throughout the state. It's the singular most important piece of legislation for economic development that we've passed, I think, in the last 10 years. It was signaled by CBIA and various other groups, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association and other groups, is one of the most important acts. I'm very proud we brought that forward. I can't claim authorship because the bill initiated about 5 years ago, but we were able to bring it to fruition. Concomitant with that, we raised our bonding for brownfield remediation. So if you think about it, we worked on the Transfer Act. When I started in the legislature, we spent about $50 million every 2 years or 25 a year on brownfield remediation. This is to get toxic cleanup sites in all of our major cities or ex-industrial sites redeveloped. And in the current budget, the prior biennium, we raised it to, I think, about 75 million, or 70, 35 each session. And this year, we're at about $100 million, 50 million per session, to get toxic fields remediated. Why is that important, both as for Commerce and as a resident of Greenwich? It's not just how we defend ourselves and defend our interests within the state. It's our impetus and engine for economic development and growth. We are inimically tied to the state of Connecticut unless Fairfield decides to secede. And I guess if we secede, we can always go to Westchester, and the tax rates are about 3 times higher. So we're going to stay within the state of Connecticut. We are desperately interested in economic success. And I took the job as co-chair of Commerce on that. Along with those 2 issues, I haven't had success yet in the bonding committee, and you'll see more press as we move forward this year. It's to look for economic development in our major tourist site, which is Mystic, which comprises the town of Stonington and Groton. And it's to be able to develop Mystic as a bigger tourist destination site to rival a little bit what we see across the pond, or across the state border in Watch Hill. And it's try to bring further economic development along our shoreline. And that will be an ongoing issue that I'll be looking to bring forward. But economics are the issue. In relation to local control, you know, I voted against the housing bill. I thought it was an overreach. I continue to support local control. As I often say, I was born in the Bronx. I lived in Brooklyn before I came here. I chose to leave both of those locations to come to Greenwich. I'm not trying to bring them with me. So I'm looking that we have sound and safe economic development that's sponsored by local control. So.
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, so the first piece of legislation I was most proud to advance was Senate Bill 4, which was the significant energy reform package that I co-authored and negotiated through the legislature with my Democratic colleagues on the Energy Committee and my Republican ranking member from the House, Tracy Mara. For the last 2.5 years, I've been advocating, shall we say, vigorously to eliminate the public benefits charge, which I view as an unfair tax in our electric bill, which contributes to Connecticut having the third highest electric rates in the country. I succeeded 2 years ago in requiring that part of the charge that we are paying through our electric bill is itemized, so we see it every single month and know at least what we're being forced to pay. This year, I finally had some success with my Republican colleagues in reducing those charges. Unfortunately, we were only able to reduce them by about $100 million out of the $1 billion statewide in the annual public benefits charges. But nonetheless, it was the first significant progress we've ever seen on that front. And it was a product of 2.5 years of advocacy and negotiating. And finally, we made some progress. There's about $105 million of cuts to public benefits charges. There's another $85 million of reductions in costs from distribution and transmission charges incurred and passed on by the utilities. And there is also the separation operationally of the Department of Environment and Energy from the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, which is important. It sounds arcane, but it's important. Republicans have been arguing for it for 10 years, and even some Democrats for many years have been arguing for it, because it creates a separation of powers in the policymaking and regulating of our utilities and our energy policy, because previously the adjudicatory body, PURA, which is tasked with objectively regulating and setting utilities rates, was working for the policy-making body of the governor's office, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. That created what I believe was a conflict. And finally, after fighting for many years and advocating for many years, we were actually able to make that separation of powers a reality. So I'm very proud of the legislation. It was just a first step, in my mind, to providing genuine relief and affordability in a state with the third highest electric costs in the country, but it was also the most significant progress we've ever seen on that front, so I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud of authoring and passing Senate Bill 1558, which is an effort, first effort to claw back tax revenue that is unfairly being taken by the state of New York from Connecticut residents who work from home for New York companies for part of their year. As is, if you work for a New York company, say in Greenwich, you commute in 4 days a week and you work the 5th day from home, you work weekends from home, you're taxed all 5 days, 100% of your income by the state of New York, which is especially problematic for those residents because New York plus New York City charges a much higher income tax rate. It's problematic, obviously, for all of us and the entire state of Connecticut because it's revenue that is being stolen rightfully and constitutionally from the state of Connecticut. The law I passed wasn't everything that I initially proposed, but it does two things. It would create a very large credit for any resident of Connecticut that is successful in appealing and litigating a challenge to New York and bringing money back. So it will subsidize and encourage the legal process taking place and setting the precedent eventually for all those Connecticut residents who are concentrated in our district to be protected. And it also requires the Office of Attorney General to report back on a legal strategy for the state to engage that process and hopefully move that process along. So I'm very proud to have co-authored both of those pieces of legislation and ultimately got them to passage in a bipartisan fashion. I think that they're important for our economic future.
Thanks so much. Those were super helpful, comprehensive answers. And for the next question, I'd love to go to kind of the rapid fire approach. Tina starting, if you can do it. It's hard, I know. But what are notable challenges of the last session, highlight challenges, and then your focus for the next session?
Thank you. There we go. How about now? Okay, thank you. I would say the two challenges, the most significant challenge was the budget. The fiscal guardrails were enacted in 2017 and really put Connecticut, for the first time in a long time, on a path to fiscal recovery. We were paying down our debt, we were keeping our spending under control. And the budget that we passed, which I voted against this session, and other activity in the legislature broke the guardrails in three ways. We created an off-balance sheet account for the preschool endowment, which is a very, very valid cause and could have been done in a fiscally responsible way, but was not. And that broke our spending cap. We also changed our volatility cap to an enormous amount, $600 million of money that would have been going in 26 and 27 to pay down pension debt, which is an enormous credit card debt out there on the state, is simply going to go into the budget now. So it was my first term, but those that have been there a long time said it was one of the most disappointing things in their career. So we need to, I don't know where we are right now. We had guardrails in place and we had controls in place and we were on a path. And quite frankly, I don't know where we stand right now. But what I can tell you is that we go back in January and we keep trying. We can put the guardrails back, we can control our spending, and we can amend the budget always. And so there's a lot more work to be done on that. So that was a big challenge. Secondly, and I know this is not rapid fire, on the housing bill will be back. It included fair share, it included work-live ride, it included a restriction, an inability of towns to require parking spaces for housing units up to 24. It was an overreach, as Steve said. It will be back in some way, shape, or form, maybe even in a special session this fall. So there's more work to be done on that, and what I would really like to do is try to propose a local control generated comprehensive housing plan for the state of Connecticut, because we need to do something about it, but I just think we're going about it in the wrong way. So more work to be done there.
We'll go Steve, Hector, Ryan. So Steve.
So I think the biggest challenge facing us on a bipartisan basis is getting to an agreement on the budget that provides for both economic development and provides for future financial security. As we step into the close of this budget, we're at about $2 billion surplus. We are going to end up with probably 500 that needs to be reserved, looking at what's going on in Washington. And we'll have to figure out from there what amount will go to pay down the ongoing deficit. So we probably will be in a special session sometime in October. I doubt we'll be dealing with spending, but we'll see if anything comes up there in relation to cutbacks, rescissions, because most of the budgetary cuts are going to come a year from now, post the midterm elections. So all of the major cuts will happen then, although there are cuts now both to education, healthcare, et cetera, that are clawbacks. So we're going to have a tough time on that. We have to figure out how we balance those needs versus future needs. But I think the most important thing is to move forward on investments in Connecticut, the Early Childhood Education Fund, early childhood education, providing the basis for people to go back to work where they have affordable childcare is so important, and investing in our future, the economy. Though growing the state is going to be where my focus is, and creating opportunity so that we lift all of those in this state. And that rising level of inequality is going to be most fixed by more opportunity and by the state taking a proactive role in economic development. And you can count on my support there.
Thank you, Steve. Well, moving forward, certainly, in the short term, we have the housing bill. Most likely we'll have and be in Hartford in September. There is a lot of work being done between the governor and CCM, Westcott, local municipalities, and the different committees, and we are all expecting to see what we see at the end of that bill. Certainly what Tina mentioned is something that we all like to see, but when we say plans coming from local municipalities, and I think that we all be pushing for that, but we mean serious plans. Plans that we will have the involvement of municipalities in affordable housing. And this is something that in many towns remains to be seen. And we know that the governor is moving in that direction. Certainly Washington, I will not go over what we see every other day on the local press, on the consequences that what is going on in Washington brings to the state. That will be a challenge for us, but thanks to a great governor that we have and the administration that he has been doing in the last 2 terms, including this one, we are in good fiscal condition, as Steve mentioned too. By now, I think that we will be seeing when the reconciliation comes in November, an additional between 450 and 500 million. I don't think that we will revisit spending on that. That will go to pay debt or to the rainy fund. So those are challenges that we'll be facing over the next session. Thank you.
The 2 most frustrating developments in the legislature this session were the budget and housing, without a doubt. The budget, it hasn't been fully appreciated, I think, in the media. The budget was horrible. There's no 2 ways about it. The budget broke the budget fiscal guardrails that were passed on a bipartisan basis 8 years ago and have saved the state taxpayer billions of dollars since. It went around the spending cap by creating a separate budget account. Imagine you and your spouse set a $100,000 annual budget for your household and another $5,000 to save for your kids' college education. And you just start spending an extra $5,000 or $10,000 outside that budget, but then because you say that's a different budget, even though your income hasn't changed, that you're respecting the budget you set for your household. In reality, you're draining your future savings. That's what this budget did. And that's on top of the fact that it's increasing spending on the budget by 5% year over year. Our state economy's not growing at 5% year over year. People's incomes across the state aren't growing at 5% year over year. Yet we increase spending on budget by 5% year over year. So we broke the spending cap by spending around the spending cap, the budget. That is irresponsible. Those monies could have been spent on budget if they were a priority. We also broke what was called the volatility cap, which is responsible for paying down billions of dollars of pension debt over the last 8 years to the tune of $600. So we're going to be paying down $600 million less pension debt because of the change to the volatility cap, lifting it by $600 million per year into the future. And on top of that, the budget still increased taxes by $500 million on hospitals, nursing homes, and businesses, small, medium, and large. But more importantly, the budget will lead to income tax increases in the future. Mark my words. I was extraordinarily disappointed in this budget. The governor ran for re-election promising to protect the budget guardrails. He broke them. It's clear as that. If you disagree with them, so be it. Let's have an honest debate, but don't promise things that you're going to break once you're in office. The housing bill was also horrible. I'm glad that it was vetoed at the last minute. I think all of you in this audience probably deserve a lot of credit because you probably sent emails and messages to Hartford to encourage that it be stopped. So that is a positive development, and you deserve immense credit for that. I am concerned about what will ultimately come in the special session, however. My kind of baseline anticipation is that you'll get something that's 20 or 30% less bad than what was passed and vetoed. I think fair share will be watered down. I think the parking requirements will be watered down. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I've offered, repeatedly, and Tina and Republicans in the legislature have offered repeatedly, we want to come to the table, we want to negotiate. I think it's one of the easiest issues to actually find a grand bargain on, something that's bipartisan, something that meets the needs and interests of the cities, the suburbs, and the rural towns alike, because there's so many different mechanisms in policy. It's not just like a couple things, it's like 100 things. And we could trade away, as suburbs, things that we care less about and they care more about, and we can get in return things that we care more about, like 830G reform and stopping fair share. In exchange, we can make it a lot easier to do accessory dwelling units and a conversion of commercial and mixed use to residential, and housing in kind of Main Street downtown locations. There is a grand bargain. There is potential for bipartisan compromise. It's just a matter of the people with the most power agreeing to bring everyone to the table. So listen, that's a month away. It's coming up. My phone hasn't rang since the veto, but there are people in different towns and cities and on both sides of the aisle who want to negotiate, who want to compromise. We just need everyone to be called to the table to do so.
Thanks, Ryan. This next one, it goes first to Steve, and then we'll move to the right. The recent 10% fare increase announced by the MTA has raised concern among commuters. Could you share how the legislature plans to address transportation affordability while still focusing on improving transit services in the coming years?
Okay. So transportation, particularly for a place like Greenwich, is so important because of the nexus with New York. But investing in our transportation network is crucial. So how do you invest in transportation without making the appropriate allocations? While Greenwich and New Haven line consumes a fair amount of the subsidies on a per capita basis, it's one of the lowest contributions because of the density of commuters who are going into the city. How do I address the issue of cost? It's by increasing utilization. It's by improving and investing in the infrastructure. We are making massive investments in bridges that are over 200 or over 100 years old, up and down the line to improve times and turnaround. I don't have an easy answer for how we reduce the cost of transportation if you consider that electricity is part of that cost. If you look at what's going across the nation, between the demands for power, between artificial intelligence, with the steel and aluminum imports and what we're going to spend to try to rebuild the manufacturing industry in the country, energy is going to be a continuing ongoing problem in cost to the state. So I think we have to continue to make the investments. We have to see what we can do to encourage the commuter rail lines, but we have to figure out how else we subsidize those lines. I don't think I have an easy answer to how we handle the increase, given the cost of living and the general increases across the board that we're all facing.
Thanks, Tina.
What I'll add to what Steve said is that we have some of the highest construction costs in Connecticut among the 50 states because we are mandated and must select project labor agreements for our major transportation infrastructure builds. So that means that we are under contract at above market rates to build infrastructure. So it becomes prohibitively expensive. The legislature this year did not tackle any major infrastructure transportation bills. The transportation bills that passed were more on the micro level, like, is there reciprocity in a DUI on a boat relative to someone driving a car? Those were more, towing statutes were amended this year in the legislature. We didn't tackle the big issues of infrastructure, but I do think that because we are a state with those kinds of costs, because we're a heavily unionized state, and I agree that we should have unionized workers, but we need to lower those costs if we're really going to start moving the needle on transportation.
Yeah, well, listen, if you don't come to terms with what Tina just said, you're always going to have very high transportation costs and ultimately a poor quality of transportation, because actually doing the investment becomes a lot less efficient. At Metro North, the New Haven line, I think, subsidizes every ride by the taxpayer, $3 to $4 per ride. Other passenger rail lines in the state subsidize every ride up to about $100 per ride. So there should be some proportionality and fairness to taxpayers down here. We should also seek to be creative and innovative about how we speed up the trains. You don't have to straighten the tracks, because that would require eminent domain and enormous capital investment. You could look at things like super re-elevation, which is done in Europe, which if you go around a turn, you could elevate one side of the track so the physics allow you to go at a faster speed safely. Rather than doing eminent domain in Coscob, where the bend exists in the Metro North line, for instance. There are ways we could creatively invest better. The prioritization of our investment dollars should be to reduce traffic and improve the service on Metro North in Lower Fairfield County. I think it can be done if we do prioritize those high needs of the state, and you have to look at costs. The project labor agreements are an issue. It's 40% more per unit of cost. I mean, it's just like, it's abusive to taxpayers at a certain point. And then try to bring in more kind of tradespeople to the state, have a lower cost to the licensing fees. You have reciprocity for the licenses, and so on. Make it easier to become an apprentice and then become a full-time journeyman in the trades. We have to create opportunity for people in those areas. I think Steve and the Commerce Committee actually did advance pro-apprenticeship legislation on a bipartisan basis, but it couldn't be passed into law. There was some minor change that was good, but can't get past the interests in the Labor Committee. So there's a lot of ways we can improve the cost structure, improve quality, and create economic opportunity for people who actually want jobs.
Hector, on transportation.
Thank you. Well, not much to add. Certainly, infrastructure as public health are the two most dependent areas for our state and many other states from Washington. So that's something that will be a priority next year. This year, as Tina very well said, not much has been passed on transportation regarding new infrastructure, basically because the uncertainty that we had from the federal government. Going back to the budget, I would like to add a few comments. Well, as per the governor reported and the General Assembly passed, the spending cap will be 1.5 million. We will be below the cap on year one and 70 million below the cap in year two. And in reference to the volatility cap, by statute, when the financial guardrails were established in 2017 and the different conditions that the state is today, both the General Assembly and the governor has the authority, has the right within certain limits to move the volatility cap. And that's what was done this year. So that is under statute. So when we do it under statute, during the needs that we are facing in the state, that's what the governor proposed and we pass in the House and in the Senate. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to now go to a question, one of the first ones that came in online, and that is, what are some ideas on how youth in Greenwich can engage more directly with state government? And I'll just see who has a suggestion first to decide to, okay, so Hector's going to go first here.
Well, all the schools, public and private, are doing a tremendous job. I have the opportunity this year to have senior students from Greenwich High School as my interim during the last month of the session, and it was a very interesting session. The discussions that we heard on housing, on the budget, was Ethan Cooper, and a brilliant student from Greenwich High School. And it was interesting to see him to engage and how much he knew about what was going on and the education that he received at our public schools, and the drive and motivations. He drove every day. I mean, the parents just trust me with the driving, sometimes coming back close to midnight, and sometimes staying in Hartford. But it's a pleasure to see the motivation by the schools, the programs they have, and how much they are engaged on governance and in our schools.
Thank you. Other ideas on how youth can engage? Okay, we'll go down the line.
So I think it's incumbent on all of us, and I would turn it back to the students at some level as well. We have two dynamic, active local parties, Democratic Town Committee, Republican Town Committee. We have municipal campaigns coming up this November. So you have an opportunity here to volunteer or to get involved and look at either policies or propose policies for local issues in town. You have, I can see here our Department of Human Services is here. There are other departments who can reach out to the various departments to see what the pressing issues are and propose policies to the candidates and engage them. Ourselves here, you can work with us on community outreach, but we are, apart from a potential one-day session in October, we will be essentially out of session until, I think it's the first week in February when we start up the session. You certainly welcome to engage with us. We certainly would welcome you to work with us. A lot of our activity can be done through Zoom for that engagement. And, look, I would tell you, we were at some level, to go back 30, 40 years, a backwater. And I mean that in terms of being a state delegation. But whether or not you agree with policy at the national level, at this point, state policy has become the crux and the focal point for all of our domestic, or a large part of our domestic policy, whether it be education, whether it be diversity, whether it be equity, et cetera. All the issues you may or may not care about are going to be decided at the state level. So I encourage you that it's your democracy, enjoy it and keep it if you can, and that means you need to be involved. So I encourage you to come, and I'm doing this at the end of a 35-year banking career, and I have never had a more fruitful and enjoyable piece to my entire career. It's the best job I've ever had. And that's a combination of what I get to do up there and what I get to do here. But the population needs to get more involved, and I welcome them. So I'd say we're all available. Reach out to us. But everybody waits for someone else to tell you what to do. The most dynamic people are the ones who come up and tell me what to do or tell me what they're going to do with me. So please get involved. I encourage them.
I had 3 high school interns working with me this summer. There's so much always to research and figure out about bills to propose in the coming years. So if anyone has a young person in their family that wants to get involved in politics, I'm always looking to have interns help me out. But what I really wanted to say is testify at our state legislature on bills that are important to you. It is so compelling. These hearings go till 2 and 3 in the morning. Sometimes we have 200 people coming and testify, and the legislators really listen to each and every one of them, including young people, sometimes especially young people, when it's on the education committee, for example, and they're the most effective advocates. So please come up to Hartford and testify. It's really an inspiring experience and a very important one.
That's right.
Yes, you can testify over Zoom. So I'll give a quicker answer than I had previously. You can intern. So you can intern at the state legislature. We've had Greenwich, Stanford, and New Canaan students. Normally in their senior spring, they have an internship. Join us in the Senate Republican office as interns. That is one way. Get involved and volunteer on local campaigns for the state legislature or for local government. That is enormously, I think, fruitful and rewarding for the high school and college students I've seen engage in those campaigns. Sometimes they end up taking leadership roles in those campaigns, but they learn a lot about local government because it's not what you see on the news every day. It's not as flashy as federal politics, but it's as or more important, and you can make a difference. And finally, as Tina said, you can advocate for policies and change at the state level by testifying, by coming up. There's a young lady in the audience who last year advocated for, stand up, there you are. Who advocated, it was a high school student, advocated for a regulatory change to protect people who have allergies when they eat at restaurants. And she was ultimately successful in passing the proposal into law and had a significant thing to do with it herself. So, no matter who you are, you can make a difference if you try to bring people together, focus on the issues, and actually narrow your focus. Sometimes you think small, you think substantively and focused, you can make a bigger difference than you can ever imagine.
Thanks to you all. I just want to take a moment here if the comments so far have raised any questions from the audience, Kathy is here to take a question via an index card, or Melissa, and Kathy will grab it. But again, the questions that we have collated here have come from your submissions online, and we're trying to get to as many of them as we can. Next, what can Greenwich's municipal government do to better support you all? And we'll start with Tina.
Thank you. Greenwich's municipal government has been a huge source of support for me already in the legislature. The municipal government we have right now is very, very in touch with our citizens and very, very experienced. So when people go to our municipal government and the concerns are state level concerns, there's a very direct path for me to get those inquiries and address them. Our municipal government has high subject matter expertise. So when I am faced with a bill on a police matter, I always reach out to our police chief and the police chief of the city of Stanford so that I can know immediately how this will affect us. The same is true with our school superintendents. The same is true with our tax collector. The same is true with our first selectman. So it is a really great relationship and has been a huge help to me. Areas for improvement. I don't, none are coming to mind right now, but as we said earlier in this event, we need to come up with, some municipality-driven housing solutions because this housing pressure is not going away. And I feel like if we can take the bull by the horns, and it's not anything the municipal government hasn't done, but we need to start to come up with some things to serve as an alternative to what's coming out of Hartford.
Brian?
Well, I think the number one thing that our local citizens and local leaders can do to help us as state officials is to inform us, tell us what the town needs, alert us if something concerning is coming down the pike or something important needs to be passed. But I guess I would invert the premise of the question. I think we need to be constantly asking what can we do to stop everything that Hartford is imposing upon our towns and cities, and this town in particular, which is well-run, which deserves to have the freedom to make choices for its own community rather than constantly more mandates imposed upon us. There are 1,400 unfunded state mandates under the law here in Connecticut. They drive up the cost of our property taxes, they make it more difficult to deliver services, and still the people in power in Hartford want to impose more and more hundreds of new mandates on us. They should be asking towns like Greenwich that are well-run, what are you doing well and how can we emulate it and help you, rather than trying to impose more and more of their own will on us as a town and a community and other communities, towns and cities like us. This housing bill that almost passed, and it might eventually pass in a special session, is only one example. They want to dictate our zoning, they want to dictate our education decisions. At every turn, it seems like Hartford's making it harder on Greenwich. I think the people in Hartford should be asking towns and cities all across our state, what can we do to help you, not how can we impose more upon you.
So I think there's a disconnect between our municipal and our state government. In the past 2 years, we've looked for guidance for funding for our schools, for the capital projects. It took us well past the dates for the deadlines to submit a request for Central Middle School for the funding. We were lucky and fortunate that Hector, who sat on the Education Committee, was able to introduce legislation in the midst of the session to secure the funding. This past year, I worked to secure funding for a crosswalk with flashing signs down the Pembroke region. I come and see that the municipality has decided to narrow the road with no plan for a crosswalk. I'm a little confused that when you raise funding for crosswalks, they don't get implemented. And this past week, I was at an ADA celebration, 35 years of American with Disabilities Act, and the compliance rate on our municipal projects is at about 10%, according to the platform I saw and the promotion. So we need to work on municipal planning for our own town, for its own sake. We need to secure the plan. You need to work with the entire delegation to secure funding to aid us in those plans. Though that is not happening at a very active way. So far, we've secured funding on the Glenville project, which is the pedestrian safety. We were, prior to Tina with Rachel, we secured $6.5 million there. We secured the $450,000 for Pembroke. We're trying to secure projects where there's opportunities to do things. We've been waiting for a $450,000 allocation, as I sit on the Public Works Department in town, for the allocation to relook at what we're going to do at Holly Hill. The plan has been mothballed and sat there for about 20 years. Without new plans coming out of the town, it's hard to secure funding for the cooperation from the state. So I'd say we need a better look at future planning on capital projects on the municipal level. Costs are not going down, capital costs are going up. If we fail to plan for the future, we are going to run the risk of the town having other issues like Central Middle School, where the walls are falling down. And we need to make plans on capital. And we can work better. We have never failed to pick up the phone. We have never failed to ask the town what we can do for them. And frankly, we've not failed in delivering funding for a myriad of projects in town. And so I think the cooperation from our side is there. I think the municipal planning is lacking. Thank you.
And I fully agree with what Steve said. What we have been seeing over the last 3 years is, our involvement. When Rachel was before, and the three of us working as a team, trying to secure and working with the Public Works, working with Planning and Zoning, working with Board of Education. But have been our initiative, our involvement, our work, our reaching out, our doing this, our doing that, and delivering to Greenwich. And we would like to see better planning that we don't have today on capital issues. I think that Central Middle School was an upside work because as of January 2024, when the project came out from Administrative Services, and it was not included on the priority list, Greenwich was on the way to receive 0 for the construction of Central Middle School. And so to move from 0 to what we did with Rachel and Steve, certainly it was an upside battle without much collaboration from the town. Thank you.
Thanks. A student submitted a question writing, in Greenwich, the superintendent can remove a book from the school library or curriculum without public review. Can you comment on Bill 523, the so-called Don't Ban Library Books Act? Anyone interested to comment on that?
Well, I think that that bill, what we have been seeing is the responsibility going into the Board of Education, into our librarians. They are all experts, and certainly they have been doing a tremendous job trying to have books that are not age appropriate out of those sections, and that is done in the Greenwich Public Library. So that is what that bill will be pursuing.
Any other comments?
This takes us into culture wars. It's an uncomfortable area for all of us. We all have children. We all have family members. We all come from a diverse background. I think the freedom to access books and to make sure the books are curated should reside with professionals. We need to see how we keep an open mind and an open community. The level of discourse and the level of tolerance in this country is dropping. And it's part of a civil society to be able to say, I don't agree with you, I don't agree with your ideas, but I'm not going to ban those ideas. And I think it's important, if you look at the foundational part of our democracy and the concepts we have about freedom of speech and thought, that we don't have to celebrate every aspect of thought. We don't have to celebrate every aspect of a social position we disagree with. But we have to dignify people with the acceptance that they have a certain right both to express themselves, and that the public sphere is not supposed to be a sphere where we try to curtail them. And a library is a place of learning, and it's a learning place from the entire spectrum of left to right, of top to bottom. And we need to keep those fountains of knowledge open for all people, for people who don't think like we think, who don't have our life experience, so they have resources and knowledge to be able to grow and mature and become productive members of society. And I think we're in the right place.
I definitely agree that schools, especially in libraries, should be open places where free exchange of ideas occurs. I think on the issue of book banning, the closer this decision is to the people, the better. So to get a mandate from Hartford on what constitutes a book to be banned or what doesn't, to me, is very disconnected from democracy and very disconnected from the people most affected. There should be a different decision at a middle school than there should be at an elementary school. Parents should be involved, the PTA should be involved, teachers should be involved, experts should be involved. And so we need to keep those distinctions alive, and we need to keep the decision-making on these issues as close to the people as possible.
Yeah, and listen, almost no one, I think, is trying to ban books. I think it is there's a normal kind of there's a normal discussion that a culture and a society would have over, what type of material is appropriate for people at what age and in what setting. And that's not always a cut and dry question. Catcher in the Rye, is it appropriate for an 11th grader versus a 9th grader versus a 6th grader? And then books with certain pictorial depictions, graphic depictions, are those appropriate for a high school library, or so on and so forth? These are normal kind of things that a society grapples with and a community grapples with, and having, parents able to, or local officials able to intercede and make decisions is normal stuff. I objected to some of Bob Duff, the Senate Majority Leader from Norwalk's proposals, because it sought to, I think, overly politicize an issue that was more something you see in the national news, and prescribe a local decision, locally the decision-making process, rather than letting the localities kind of prescribe these own decision-making processes for themselves. In this case, there's going to be politicization that's unfair on both sides across a very large country. I think in this case, the legislation was a solution in search of a problem because it was looking to engage in the culture wars. And so that was one of the reasons why you saw a lot of opposition to the proposal that was made by a senator from Norwalk.
Thank you. You can keep the microphone. Brian, you can answer first on this one. Submitted question. Connecticut was ranked 35th nationally in terms of business friendliness by CNBC. This category evaluates legal and regulatory framework and its acceptance of new and emerging industries. Do you think this metric is important? And if so, what would you do to improve it?
And I remember that study that came out. It comes out annually, but it just came out a couple of weeks ago. And what it actually said, if you dig down deeper, is that one of the reasons Connecticut is more attractive as a place to do business and create jobs is because the quality of the people in the workforce is so high. And we have great people. We have great people here in this community, and we have great people all across the state, highly educated, strong communities, really a desirable place to live, raise a family, and create jobs on those merits. But in study after study, including this one, the cost of doing business, the cost of living, the taxes, the electric rates are so high that it's actually driving people out of a state that's so wonderful, with great, highly educated people, with strong communities, with beautiful and well-positioned geography. The answers are ultimately that the taxes are too damn high, the electric rates are too damn high, and we keep raising them year after year in Hartford over a long period of time, with the sole exceptions being the small cut to the public benefits fees in SB4 this year and the budget in 2023 that had some tax relief. But over a long period of time, those policies have made things even more costly to create jobs, to build a life, to work. We need to reverse those policies, reduce public benefits charges, reduce the cost of healthcare and improve affordability, protect budgetary and fiscal guardrails that limit spending and debt, and cut taxes on middle-class families so we don't have the third highest taxes in the country, according to the Tax Foundation. So I think the 35th is not good enough. We should have higher standards in Connecticut, but under the hood, it was even worse than that, because the costs imposed by the state government in Hartford are making it far more difficult to create jobs and work here. We could do so well in this state just if we had the right policies, because we have great communities, great people, a great workforce, almost everything else working for us as a state.
Yes, I think that this is a really big issue in our state, and one that I care deeply about. I proposed legislation this session, which got out of the General Law Committee, to lower the professional fees for accountants, for example, CPAs doing business in the state of Connecticut. And I looked at 8 states in New England, and we were 6 times higher than the next state in terms of what we're charging an accountant just to renew their annual fee. I had 2 constituents come to me about this, a retired accountant who lives in Greenwich, who's just trying to make money now in his retirement, and a young accountant who runs her own firm in Stamford, who has to pay this fee for each one of her employees. And our fee is $565, and the next highest was under $100. So we have those nicks and cuts in every aspect of our business world in Connecticut, and it really does add up. I was also, as a first-time legislator, surprised to see how disconnected at times our General Assembly is from how the market works. We have a shortage purportedly of affordable housing, I think we do, in the state of Connecticut, and yet we keep piling onerous demands on landlords, which is the last thing we need to do if we want to incentivize them to come into the state and provide housing. We passed a bill in the legislature this year which prevented landlords from using pricing algorithms in setting rents. We basically were judge, jury, witnesses, defendants, plaintiffs, all of it in the General Assembly. We unilaterally decided that there was a monopoly pricing going on and that landlords could no longer use algorithms. I have no idea whether that's true or not, but now it's prohibited. And it may be a very common and logical free market tool that landlords need to use, but now it's prohibited in the state of Connecticut. So I think we can slowly but surely chip away at these and make it better and better for businesses to come here, and it's definitely a priority.
Connecticut has a tremendous amount of geographic advantages in its proximity to New York. We have strength in our military industrial complex with the defense industry well anchored in the state. We have a good educational system. We do have to deal with our taxes. We have to make sure that we keep a cap on the taxes. And we have to make sure we reinvest in the state. So to that end, we paid down about $8 to $11 billion. I'm kind of lost track exactly where we are, of unfunded pension liabilities that had accumulated over 70 years. Never should have happened. We continue to pay them down this year. I expect we'll pay down an additional $500 to $700 million. That's on top of the typical amortization pay downs, which are scheduled over the next 10 to 15 years. So we're getting somewhere in adjusting the balance sheet of the state in a sane way. I think one of the things that I would champion is what I mentioned in my first speech or commentary about commerce, about reinvesting in our city with brownfields, the Transfer Act, et cetera. And the last piece, the state, we have a tug of war on a partisan basis, if we're going to talk about it, which is, and the question is between social spending and no spending. And I think the question has to be between social spending and some spending. And if that spending needs to be on things like the tourism and the infrastructure for tourism to attract people to the state. With an aging population in the United States in general, it's a time of life where people begin to spend more money than they've accumulated over the course of their life. And they do it on vacations, on experiential things. We need to make sure that we are doing something. As I said, I focus right now on the Mystic area. We've got a couple of areas in the state. I'd like to bring that to fruition over the next 2 to 3 years in my world in commerce, to make the right investment in the tourism area there, and to see where along the coastline, going down from the Mystic area, we can make further investments to grow the economy of the state, to provide great opportunities. Lastly on that, Ryan had mentioned, and I appreciate his acknowledgement on the ratio bill, on the apprentice bill. That actually did get through general law, and so we did reduce barriers to allow apprentices to work in shops where there was a very high restriction. I would prefer to see it eliminated. We reduced the ratio, so now people graduating from our trade schools can get out and get apprentice jobs and eventually become journeymen, union or non-union, but that's a 4 to 5 year process once you finish your education. We had capped the number of jobs available. We've raised the limit substantially. I'm hoping to see those jobs filled, and I'll be pressing to raise the limit or remove it altogether if we continue to see that growth in apprentices. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I like to see the glass is three-quarter full and not quarter empty. And that's how I pursue things. And certainly there are a lot of things to improve in the state. But let's look at some numbers of Connecticut. 16,000 new jobs added in 2024. GDP grew 2.6% in 2024. And rising to the 23rd fastest in the US, driven by gains in retail, finance, and real estate. Unemployment, near full employment. As of May 2025, the labor force reached a record of 1.96, fully recovering pandemic area losses and surpassing pre-COVID levels, fourth consecutive year of net immigration. And I am coming from the business sector. So from the business sector, when we look into the markets after 40 years in finance, certainly the ratings were quite important for all of us, I'm sure for many of you. So let's see, Fitch Ratings, April 2025, assigned AA to Connecticut 1.9 billion general obligation bonds, affirmed the issuer default rating at AA with a positive outlook. SP Global, mid-2025, elevated the state credit rating from A+ positive to AA stable. Connecticut is investment grade. And I can keep going with Moody's. Let's go to the manufacturing industry. The emergence in manufacturing. Connecticut manufacturing sector group from, I love this. Here I am. Connecticut manufacturing sector grew from 10% to 12.6% of state GDP between 2022 and 2025, generating an additional $2 billion in revenue. Defense strength, and I can keep going in all the good things that we have here in the state, and that we will try certainly work hard to improve and see what else and how we can better off certain areas. Thank you.
Thanks. We have less than 5 minutes left, and we're going to end on time. We'd like to go back to a question that has come in a number of different ways and that you all mentioned in your opening comments. Can you give one example of an effort you made to cross the aisle to benefit Greenwich residents? Specifically, talk about how you work together in bipartisan fashion for the benefit of shared constituency in Greenwich. And again, we have less than 5 minutes, so this is kind of a rapid, good news story on which to end. And Steve can go first if you'd like, but really, or a minute or less from each of you, please, for this question.
Well, I guess we'll go back to the comment we were talking about citizen engagement. So actually, the young lady who stood up, I should have acknowledged as well. She approached me on one of my canvassing trips throughout the neighborhood and approached me along with her family. They cornered me, I believe at a dinner they were having. And I think they invited me, it was quite good. And the issue became the question and the horrors and the risks in food allergies. So we had that conversation there, and I introduced them to the legislature, and I introduced them, and Ryan and I helped bring forward the bill on the food allergies. So the engagement and the bipartisan nature was there on that. I would say, in general, we tend to agree on a lot more of what there is to agree on, even with the partisan nature of the world we're in today. So generically, I think almost every bill I brought out of Commerce had their support. We have 151 state reps. Generally, anything I brought out of Commerce as co-chair had about, I think I want to say about 135 or 140 yes votes. So you can't get there without a bipartisan nature in the effort. And that's always been there. And certainly when the town needs help, we're always working together to get that done.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay?
And brief comments from the rest of the gang. Tina?
Thank you. I would say for me, this session, it was a special education bill. That bill, even if you don't have a special education child, it's important for all of us at a moral level, but also at an economic level, because to the extent that special ed dollars are not controlled, they come out of the general education budget and they also come out of the town budget. So it was very important for me to work with the chair of the Select Committee on Special Ed to resolve a tension. And the tension was more spending on that side of the aisle, and on my side of the aisle, more accountability for outcomes. Like, I still don't have in front of me, and we're going to work on this over the next few years, a measure of how well we're doing special ed in Connecticut. To me, that boggled my mind. Shouldn't we know that? Shouldn't we have outcomes? Shouldn't we have a matrix of how well we're doing on this? Anyway, that was the tension, throwing more money at the problem or really try to measure outcomes. And I was really happy with where we ended on that. We also are capping the rates that private providers can pay for special ed. Again, there was tension on that side of the aisle, just cap them as low as possible. But on our side of the aisle, it was sort of, well, if you cap their rates too low, you're going to drive all those providers out of the market. And the last thing we want to do is limit the choices that special education children have to get a great education. So we resolved that tension by basically putting the state on a slow burn to do a rate-setting mechanism over a period of time with experts involved that can try to get that attention right. It was very important to me that that bill passed unanimously. Anything should be bipartisan. It should be our special education framework in the state of Connecticut, and we accomplished that. That work will continue, but I was very proud of that effort this year.
Thanks. Ryan?
I'm very proud of my bipartisan record of legislating. I co-authored and passed, I think, 7 laws over the past few years with bipartisan support, from energy reform to improving birth control access to protecting local control of decision-making. But I really also value the relationships I've built with many of my Democratic colleagues, with people on both sides of the aisle in Hartford. And I think it's in our more and more divided political culture in this country and in the state, I think it's important to remember that good people can disagree about politics and policy. And it's better to have a conversation than simply to cast stones. And we should start with criticizing policies and beliefs before we criticize people as they are, and certainly before we criticize groups of people as they are. I think by trying to focus on substance and disagreeing agreeably, and then also finding the things we have in common with people we otherwise don't often agree with, I think we can go a long way to creating a more united state and country. So I really have valued the relationships and the friendships I've made on both sides of the aisle, even when we disagree. They're very important to me, and I hope that whether it's at the local or state or national level, that we could do a lot to mend the schisms that have been created in an increasingly divided political culture.
Thanks, and we're at time, so Hector, just a brief final word on the subject.
Very good. Well, when I went through orientation in 2024, the first thing that we were told was that talk less, listen more. At the end of the day, 95% of the bills that we pass in the General Assembly are bipartisan. And that is how we work in the House and I suppose in the Senate. The relationship in the House between the majority leader, the Speaker, and the minority leader is impressive. It's impressive to see. And just as an achievement, I have an excellent relationship with the ranking member in Housing, Representative Scott, Tony Scott. With him, we work in 2024, just very close to almost defeat the housing bill that we didn't succeed. In 2025, we were also together on a housing bill where we made substantial changes that were given by our planning and zoning from Greenwich and other Fairfield towns, from Westcock and from CCM, and we were able to introduce all the changes of the bill passed. And in 2025, we also work together. I mean, we try to make changes. We succeed in some, but not enough to make it a good bill.
Thank you. The final question is a yes or no answer. Is Connecticut the pizza capital of the U.S.?
Yes.
I want to thank with great sincerity our representatives for being here tonight. And for our audience members, and for the club, and for the volunteers at the League of Women Voters who work to make this event possible. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.